"Don't be nervous, sweetheart. I made this coffee just for you." That's what my husband Daniel said, his voice soft. But something in his eyes made my stomach twist. The mug he handed me felt warm, familiar, but the smell there was something metallic, almost chemical, hiding under the rich roast. We were sitting in Rebecca's pristine kitchen. My sister-in-law, ever poised and perfect, smiled from across the marble island. Her coffee sat untouched, mine was practically being pushed into my hands. I'd been here before. Not just this house, but this exact moment offered something special, with too many eyes watching to say no. This time I was ready. I lifted the cup slowly, eyes scanning the room. Daniel stood just a little too close to Rebecca. Her eyes gleamed with something that wasn't kindness. I pretended to take a sip, just enough to wet my lips. I let the bitterness linger on my tongue, confirming what I already feared. Something was wrong. Seconds later, I stumbled, oh clumsy me, spilling just enough coffee to switch cups when no one was watching. 5 minutes later, Rebecca took a sip of her own coffee. She blinked, paused, her hand began to tremble. And then her smile cracked. "Daniel," she whispered, eyes wide with panic. Something's not right. That's when I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was real. And I was done being the victim. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31 years old, live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and if you asked anyone about me a year ago, my coworkers, my friends, they'd tell you I was focused, ambitious, maybe even a little too trusting. I work as a strategic branding consultant, building corporate identities, managing million-dollar accounts. I didn't get here by chance. I worked hard, kept my head down, and let my results speak for themselves. Daniel Carter, my husband, used to be my safe place. A tech engineer turned project manager, he had this calm, collected way of making everything seem okay, even when it wasn't. Rebecca Hart, my sister-in-law. Well, she was the opposite. Sharp suits, sharper tongue. She ran Hart & Finch Marketing, one of the most aggressive firms in the Southeast. She played the role of the loving big sister beautifully, too beautifully. Behind the staged brunches and over-polished compliments, something darker lived in her. At first, I ignored it, chalked it up to insecurity, maybe even jealousy. I'd been landing clients her firm wanted, beating her to proposals, outperforming her in pitch rooms. But I never gloated, never fought back. I didn't think I had to. Then came the subtle things. At our engagement party, Rebecca accidentally spilled red wine on my ivory dress. She gasped, apologized, offered to pay for cleaning, but the damage was done. At my first Christmas with the family, I got violently ill after dinner. Daniel blamed the oysters. Rebecca said she felt a little off too, though she looked just fine. Over time, the incidents piled up, small enough to excuse, frequent enough to notice. A strange rash after tea at her house, a pounding headache following her birthday brunch. One trip to urgent care turned into 3, then 5. I started keeping a journal. I logged every meal, every symptom, every visit. Still, I questioned myself. Was I overthinking? Maybe my body was just sensitive. Maybe stress was catching up with me. But then I noticed something else. Daniel, my husband, started spending more time at Rebecca's, helping her with family projects, staying late to fix her network issues. I'd catch glances exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, texts that were deleted before I could see them, and the way he started making coffee, carefully, rehearsed, always offering me the first sip. It wasn't love I saw in his eyes anymore. It was guilt. The doubts became louder when I stopped ignoring them. I began watching, really watching. One night I stayed up late, pretending to sleep. Daniel crept out of bed, tiptoed into the study. I followed silently, just far enough to hear his voice low and hurried on the phone. I only caught fragments. "She's still fine. We need to be careful. Yes, I'll handle it tomorrow." "She won't make the pitch." My blood froze. I didn't know if he was talking about me or some business deal, but something inside me twisted with certainty. I knew it was time to stop playing safe. The next day, I swapped the sugar jar in our kitchen with one I had tested myself. Daniel never noticed. When he offered to make me tea that evening, I smiled and said yes. I watched every move. He used a small container from the cabinet, one I hadn't seen before, labeled in faint handwriting detox powder. I took the cup and flushed the contents the moment he turned away. That night I didn't get sick, and suddenly everything started connecting. Every unexplained symptom, every missed opportunity, every accident that seemed to benefit someone else. I remembered a key presentation last spring when I'd been chosen to lead the proposal for the Linford Hotel's account. A game changer. But I missed it violently ill with stomach cramps and migraines. Rebecca's firm swooped in and landed the contract. Coincidence maybe once, but not again. I reviewed my medical records. 3 hospital visits in 6 months each time with ambiguous symptoms, vomiting, dizziness, numbness. Never consistent, never clear. Every time after eating or drinking. Something they'd prepared. Rebecca always had an excuse. "You poor thing, your system must be so sensitive. Maybe it's gluten." "Oh, honey, you need more sleep." But the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching, there was calculation in her eyes, something cold. And Daniel, he started asking about my upcoming presentations, pushing me to take a break. "Let your team present for once. Maybe skip this client dinner, you've been working too hard." At first, I thought he was worried. Now I realized he was planting the idea, trying to steer me away from opportunities, from moments where I might outshine Rebecca again. I went through his phone while he was in the shower. What I found shattered what little trust I had left. Messages from Rebecca. "She can't lead the Henderson pitch. Make sure she's out that day. Try the herbal extract I left stronger than before." Daniel had replied with a thumbs up. No hesitation, no guilt. I sat there shaking anger, betrayal, and a terrifying sense of clarity washing over me. They weren't just trying to sabotage me, they were trying to ruin me, and maybe more. That's when I started recording everything. Audio memos, screenshots, journals, backups to my private cloud. I installed a second phone, hidden encrypted offline. I didn't know how far this would go, but I knew I needed to be ready. Because something told me they weren't done. In fact, they were just getting started. I didn't sleep much after that night. Every sound in the house felt louder, every creak of the floorboard like a warning. But I stayed calm, focused. Rebecca sent out an invite for our monthly family brunch the following weekend. Her usual flawless performance, complete with monogrammed napkins and a 3-course meal. I knew she'd try again, but this time, so would I. That morning I wore a hidden mic beneath my dress, wired straight to my backup phone. I carried a second device tucked into my purse, quietly recording everything. When we arrived at Rebecca's home, everything looked perfect. Too perfect. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and citrus. Daniel acted warm, overly warm. He kissed my cheek, pulled out my chair, called me Angel. I smiled back, played my role. As we sat, Rebecca handed me a coffee mug. "Daniel brewed this himself," she said with a wink. "He's been trying new blends just for you." I hesitated, just a breath. How sweet, I said, lifting the cup. The scent hit me instantly. Strong coffee and something else, sharp, chemical. Daniel watched me carefully. Too carefully. Rebecca didn't drink hers. She just stirred it, slowly, as if waiting. I set my cup down and checked my phone. Oops, urgent email. Rebecca, mind if I step into your office real quick? She nodded. Of course, it's just down the hall. As I passed her, I faked a stumble, knocked the edge of the table, apologized, and switched our cups, subtle, seamless. I closed the door to her home office, but didn't go far. I cracked it open just enough to see the table, and waited. Rebecca picked up her cup, took a sip. At first, nothing. Then, her hand trembled, her fingers curled. She set the mug down, face tightening. Daniel, she muttered, something's wrong. Daniel turned pale, stood so fast he knocked over his chair. That wasn't your cup, he said, too loud, too fast. Rebecca gasped. What did you put in it? I stepped into the doorway, calm, phone still recording. That's what I'd like to know too. Their faces were masks, panic, guilt, confusion. Rebecca slumped in her seat, sweat beading on her forehead, her lips pale. Call someone, she stammered. I already was. 911. Yes, we need an ambulance at 146 Maplewood Drive. My sister-in-law is having a severe reaction. She's conscious, but deteriorating. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her. This wasn't supposed to happen. Rebecca's voice cracked. You said it was just supposed to make her sick, not me. My voice was steady, cold. You mean, like the last 5 times she looked at me, eyes wide, wild. You knew. I knew, I said. I knew everything. I showed them the phone in my hand, the audio playing clearly. Their conversation, her confession. Daniel lunged for me, but I backed away, held the phone up high. Try it, Daniel. Let's add assault to the list. He stopped, shaking. Sirens wailed in the distance. Rebecca was sliding off her chair, barely conscious. Daniel hovered, frozen lips trembling. It was her idea, he whispered. She hated that you were winning. She hated that you made it farther than her. Rebecca coughed, barely able to speak. You said, just one more dose, just enough to keep her out of the Henderson meeting, the Henderson account. A multi-million-dollar branding deal, one I was set to pitch on Tuesday. I connected the dots instantly. Every attempt had been timed to sabotage my biggest opportunities. This wasn't jealousy anymore. It was warfare. I stayed silent until the paramedics arrived. As they loaded Rebecca into the ambulance, I handed them the coffee cup. You'll want to test that. It's not just espresso in there. Daniel tried to follow, but I stepped in front of him. I'm riding with her, I said. After all, I want to make sure she gets the right care. He nodded, stunned, defeated. I leaned in close enough for only him to hear. And you should start thinking about which version of this story you're going to tell the police, because I've already chosen mine. The emergency room at Charlotte General was chaos. Bright lights clattering gurneys, voices overlapping. But in the middle of it all, I felt calm, controlled. I sat in the waiting area, phone still in my hand, audio still saved in triplicate. I watched through the glass doors as the medical team hovered over Rebecca, now pale and shaking on the hospital bed. Daniel wasn't far behind. He claimed he was going to park the car, but he never came back inside. A nurse approached me. You're the patient's sister-in-law. I nodded. She's stable, for now, but there are some irregularities in her blood work. The doctor would like to speak with you. I followed her down a long hallway, past curtained bays and wheeled monitors. Dr. Sullivan was waiting. A tall woman, early 50s, firm eyes, no time for nonsense. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "I've reviewed the toxicology. The levels of synthetic compounds in Rebecca's blood are deeply concerning, and frankly not something we encounter often. These aren't medications. They're research-grade inhibitors designed to suppress neurological function in controlled environments." I didn't flinch. "So, not something you'd accidentally drink in coffee?" She stared at me. "No, not unless someone meant to cause harm." I handed her my phone. "You should listen to this." She did, every word. Her face changed from clinical detachment to anger. "This is attempted poisoning," she said, tapping notes into her tablet. "We're reporting this to the authorities immediately." As she turned, I caught a glimpse through the observation window. Daniel had returned, and he'd heard everything. He was standing just outside the hallway, pale as a ghost, one hand gripping the doorframe like he needed it to stay upright. "Emily, wait." He started stepping forward. "I know how this looks, but you don't understand." Rebecca twisted everything. "Security to room 212, Dr. Sullivan called over her shoulder. He raised his hands, trying to appear calm. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you to rest, that's all. You were working too hard by drugging me." His voice cracked. "You kept outshining her. Every client picked you, every account. She couldn't take it. And I thought maybe if you just missed a few meetings so she could take my place." He nodded, slow, ashamed. "The Henderson client specifically requested you. She said if we could just keep you out of that meeting." I pulled up another file, texts, forwarded from his phone the week before. "Rebecca, Tuesday is the day. Make sure she's out. Daniel, I've got the stronger stuff. She won't make it out of bed." Dr. Sullivan looked at me. "Do you have more of this?" I handed her the backup drive I'd prepared. Everything's backed up. Audio messages, even the packaging I found in Daniel's office. It's all there. 2 security guards arrived and flanked Daniel, guiding him into a nearby holding area. He didn't resist, just looked at me, hollowed out. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "We weren't trying to kill you." Dr. Sullivan cut in cold and direct. She could have died. With the dosage in that coffee, if she had drunk the full cup, she didn't need to finish the sentence. I turned to the nurse. "Please notify law enforcement." "And ask to speak to Detective Harper. She specializes in domestic violence and corporate fraud cases. I've worked with her before." When Detective Harper arrived, it was like a storm walking into a quiet room. Black blazer, no makeup, straight to business. She sat down across from me. "Tell me everything." And I did. I showed her the logs, the timelines, the symptoms, the coincidences that weren't coincidences anymore. I gave her the backup phone filled with days of covert recordings. In one clip, Rebecca's voice was unmistakable, just enough to keep her out of the picture. "She doesn't need to die, just miss the damn pitch." Another from Daniel. "The blend I made last time wore off too fast. I'll use more." Harper's pen scratched across her notepad, her jaw tightening with every word. "Do you realize how close you were to being permanently harmed?" she asked. "I do now," I said. I just didn't want to believe it. She turned to the officer nearby. "Secure their devices. We need a full sweep of their home and offices. Every drawer, every computer, every shred of documentation." By evening, Harper returned with news. We found a locked drawer in Daniel's desk. Inside were vials, clinical-grade samples labeled with Rebecca's initials and dosages. "He was tracking your reactions like a science experiment." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just sat still, let it all wash over me. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't dramatic, I was right. Rebecca remained sedated in her hospital room, No longer the icy executive, but a fragile woman hooked up to machines. Her eyes fluttered open once when I passed by, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. The plan had failed. And now, it was time to bring all of it into the light. 2 days after Rebecca's hospitalization, I received a message from someone unexpected. Dr. Ava Michaels, an old friend from undergrad, who now worked as a pharmaceutical toxicologist. We hadn't spoken in years, but she'd seen my name mentioned in a police requisition for compound verification. She called me that night. "Emily, I saw the list of substances. Do you have any idea how dangerous this was? I'm starting to." She paused. "The samples your husband accessed, they're not available commercially. Those are restricted. Either Rebecca has a direct pipeline or someone on the inside is feeding her." I sent her the photos of the vials recovered from Daniel's drawer. Within an hour, Ava called back. "One of those labels. That's my lab. I know who those were signed out to." A guy named Brad Kessler, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend. They dated years ago before he got hired at the same research facility. She must have kept tabs on him, maybe manipulated him into providing access. So it wasn't just Daniel. She had help from the inside. I sent everything to Detective Harper. She moved fast. The investigation into Brad uncovered lab access logs, secret handoffs, and payment trails. He was arrested that Friday. It should have felt like the net was tightening, and it did, but I still didn't feel safe. Because there was still one thing missing: the motive behind her obsession. And that answer came from someone I'd nearly forgotten. Her name was Lauren Grady. We'd worked together at a boutique agency before I moved on to my current role. She emailed me after reading about the hospital incident in the local paper. Her message was simple: "You're not the first. Can we talk?" We met the next morning at a small cafe downtown. Lauren looked different, tired, thinner than I remembered, eyes heavier. But her voice was steady. 3 years ago, I landed a major contract. It was supposed to go to Rebecca's firm, but I beat her to it. 2 months later, I collapsed in my apartment after a networking event. After drinking wine she gave me, my chest tightened. "You went to the police." She nodded, but I didn't have proof. Nothing concrete. The tests showed elevated toxicity, but couldn't identify the compound. Rebecca denied everything. And the contract, it slipped away. Lauren paused. I never recovered professionally. Word got around that I was unstable. Clients backed off. I left the industry 6 months later. My throat went dry. This wasn't just about me. Rebecca had been doing this for years, quietly, carefully taking down anyone who threatened her dominance. And now, thanks to Lauren, we had a pattern. Harper reopened old reports. Lauren filed an affidavit. Other whispers surfaced: 2 former interns, 1 junior exec, all women, all successful, all coincidentally sick after crossing paths with Rebecca. It was no longer a corporate rivalry. It was a pattern of systemic sabotage. And this time, we had the evidence. I agreed to testify. So did Lauren. So did Ava. Before the trial even began, 3 more witnesses came forward. One had saved a napkin Rebecca had given her at a conference, one laced with trace elements, matching the compounds in Daniel's drawer. Everything unraveled faster than I expected. The media caught wind of it. "Corporate Queenpin turns toxic" became the headline. But this wasn't about headlines. This was about justice and warning every woman who'd ever been told she was too ambitious, too intense, or too successful. I stood in front of the mirror the night before the trial began. No makeup, no lights, just me. And for the first time in months, I felt safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because I'd stopped being afraid to fight it. The courtroom was cold. Not physically, but in that silent, tense way, where every breath felt louder than it should. The walls were lined with reporters, corporate lawyers, and people who'd once called Rebecca a mentor. Now they looked at her like they didn't recognize her. She sat at the defense table, shoulders squared, hair pinned high, that same perfect posture. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted restless, shrinking, with each exhibit the prosecution displayed. Daniel sat beside her, suit-wrinkled hands trembling. His once calculated calm had vanished, replaced by the nervous tick of tapping fingers. I took the stand on the second day. My voice didn't shake. I told the court about the first time I got sick, about the slow pattern that emerged, about the coincidences that weren't coincidences at all. I described the texts, the fake concern, the cups of tea and coffee offered with smiles too perfect to be real. I played the recordings, every syllable, every admission. There was no room for doubt. Ava testified next, detailing how the chemical compounds had been stolen from a secure lab, illegally transported and weaponized without conscience. Lauren followed. Her voice cracked once, but she didn't stop. She told her story, and the jury leaned in like the weight of what she'd lived was too heavy to look away from. By the end of the week, the courtroom had changed. The pity that once lingered for the fallen marketing queen had disappeared. Now there was only disgust. The prosecution's closing argument was surgical. These were not random accidents. This was methodical. This was targeted. And it was done with full knowledge of the danger. Rebecca Hart and Daniel Carter orchestrated a months-long campaign of chemical sabotage for one reason: control, to remove an obstacle, to destroy a rising threat. I didn't need to look at the jury to know what they were feeling. I could feel it in the air. When the verdict came, it was unanimous: guilty, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit bodily harm, theft of restricted substances, tampering with medical evidence. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. The premeditated nature of this attack, the sustained abuse over time, and the betrayal of familial trust demand the harshest sentence under the law. Daniel was sentenced to 18 years, Rebecca 27. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just sat, frozen as if the truth had finally crashed through whatever armor she'd spent a lifetime building. Daniel wept quietly. I didn't feel sorry for him. They were both led away in cuffs, and just like that, the people who once shared my table, my holidays, my future, became inmates. As I stepped outside the courthouse, the sun hit my face. It felt different, not just warmer, lighter, like I'd left something behind in that courtroom that I never needed to carry again. I went home that afternoon and deleted the backups, every file, every recording, every journal entry. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed the proof. The world knew, and more importantly, I knew. 1 year later, I stood at the Charlotte Women in Business Conference, behind a sleek podium facing hundreds of fresh, determined faces. I was the keynote speaker. The irony wasn't lost on me. This very moment was what Rebecca had tried to take away. The client accounts, the spotlight, the influence. But what she never understood was the real power wasn't in any of those things. It was in survival. I looked out at the crowd, took a slow breath, and spoke from somewhere deeper than notes or rehearsals could reach. Success isn't just about the deals we close or the clients we win. It's about integrity. It's about resilience. And it's about listening to that quiet voice inside you, even when everyone else tells you to ignore it. I paused just long enough for it to land. There was a time I thought staying silent made me strong. That being nice meant I was safe, but sometimes the biggest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those who say they love you, while slowly tearing you apart. The room went still, but here's the truth, I continued. You are not paranoid for protecting your peace. You are not dramatic for noticing patterns. And you are never wrong to choose yourself over someone else's comfort. A woman in the front row wiped her cheek. Another scribbled fiercely into a notebook. I smiled. That night I walked into my apartment, dropped my bag on the kitchen counter, and poured myself a glass of wine. No paranoia, no checking the seal, no lingering aftertaste of fear, just peace and purpose. The Henderson firm had renewed their contract for another 3 years. Other clients followed. New opportunities unfolded. I was building something bigger, something rooted in transparency and truth. I didn't forgive Rebecca or Daniel. That wasn't my job. That was theirs to reckon with. But I no longer carried them with me. I had learned something far more valuable than any pitch or campaign could ever teach. That your instincts are sacred, that your voice can be a weapon or a shield, and that sometimes when the world tries to dim your light, your greatest revenge is shining anyway.